Vampire facial.
Vampire facial.
Vampire facials.
If you came here for an injection-related procedure anytime between May or September of last year, you should get tested as soon as possible.
On March 10th, 2013, Kim Kardashian posted a very interesting picture on Instagram. This picture showed her lying down on what looks to be a clinical table. She was wearing a plain white tee, her hair was wrapped in a ponytail, she had a towel by her side, and she had blood on her face? A post that sent shockwaves across the entire internet, in stark contrast to her usual glam photos with jet skis, red carpets, and fine dining restaurants. Kim Kardashian posed for a selfie showcasing her face after getting what was it called again? Oh, a vampire facial. Vampires. The creatures that creep in the dark at night, the ones who live for many years and hide from the sight of garlic and the sun, the ones who rather glisten in the sun, the ones who steal blood from the most unsuspecting, the ones who possibly even fight over the same girl even after living with each other for hundreds of years. Yes, those ones. Facials have been a cosmetic procedure around for as long as one could remember. But imagine a facial involving the use of your blood, because that is exactly what this is. In fact, this would be a thing that would become relatively popular at some point in the cosmetic dermatology world. But what if I told you there was a bit more to this vampire facial thing? You see, while this new procedure blossomed its way into the beauty field, more and more physicians began adding this revolutionary procedure to the list of services offered at their clinics. But while this new beauty trend brought a new flock of individuals ready to test the magic of blood on their face, it also opened the doors of those looking for a quick cash grab to join in on the activities. Nothing was more shocking for the New Mexico Department of Health when they discovered there was a possible HIV outbreak in their city. Because this wasn't a normal HIV outbreak. No, this was an outbreak stemming from a particular spot in the area. And it would be after a thorough inspection conducted at this particular spa when very startling secrets about how they were doing this vampire facial would be revealed. What on earth happened for the CDC and an entire Department of Health to send emergency notices across one city warning the community to get tested for HIV and hepatitis? And what lured behind the doors of a business run by a person who one could consider the real-life Count Dracula? Other than Vlad the Impaler, of course. Today we'll be discussing the vampire facial and the shocking story of how questionable practices led 3 people to be diagnosed with HIV at a spa and an entire city to be left in fear. But before we get into this case, just to introduce myself, my name is Petal Palmer, and on this channel I post anything medical, mysteries, and crime. If that is something that sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing if you end up liking this video. But before we hop into today's case, I'd like to take a minute to thank the sponsor of today's video, June's Journey. June's Journey is a free-to-download hidden object mystery game set in the 1920s. In this game, you play as Detective June Parker, who's a detective on a journey to discover the person responsible for her sister Claire's passing. Each level brings you to a very beautiful and vibrant scene, and you're tasked with finding various hidden objects placed throughout. And I'll just say it quite literally is a journey because there's actually a lot of plot twists to the storyline. You have the ability to customize your mansion and garden island. You can add flowers, you can add a fence, anything that suits your vibe personally. You can do it to your home. Interactive games have always been a favorite of mine. A lot of you know that I am a pre-med student, so especially with making these videos or studying for my classes, it's always nice being able to take a break and play a game where I can just let my brain relax and not have to think as hard. And June's Journey really does help me with that. Download June's Journey for free by clicking the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on the screen. June's Journey is available on both iOS and Android mobile devices and even on PC through Facebook Games. Thank you again, June's Journey, for sponsoring this video. Now let's hop into this case. Kim and Courtney Take Miami was a reality TV show spinoff premiering first on E! On August 16th, 2009. This was the first spinoff of the reality TV show Keeping Up with the Kardashians, which follows the life of the Kardashian family and everything they got going on. It's no secret that the Kardashians are, or at least were for many, the starter of certain trends that have shaped beauty standards in the media. They may not have been the blueprint for a lot of these beauty standards. However, with how mainstream media works, they obviously were the ones who made a lot of things popular for the general population. That's a whole topic in itself. We're not going to get too much into it, but this is still an important thing to keep in mind just to understand more of what we're about to talk about. During episode 8 of the third and final season of Kim and Kourtney Take Miami, Kim, alongside friend Jonathan Cheban, also known as Food God, ended up heading down to the Miami Institute in Miami, Florida to go see plastic surgeon Dr. Julio Gallo. And it would be at this clinic when Kim would have the oh-so-interesting, now commonly known, vampire facial procedure. Now, what is this infamous vampire facial that Kim would undergo at this clinic? The vampire facial is a term used for the medical procedure called PRP, or platelet-rich-plasma facial. PRP is an agent of therapy in regenerative medicine. While initially started as a useful method in assisting surgeries, it very quickly became a method in treating orthopedic injuries and soon enough as a staple in aesthetic dermatology. To understand PRP, it's critical to understand what a platelet is and what plasma is. Platelets are a type of cell in your blood that's responsible for blood coagulation. For example, if you ever get a cut and it stops bleeding, that's because the platelets have come to the very site of the cut and they clumped up all together to form a clot and help in stopping you from bleeding. Plasma, on the other hand, is just the liquid portion of the blood. The majority of our plasma is water, as 92% of plasma is water, and about 55% of our blood is plasma. The other 45%, however, consists of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets that just float around in the plasma. If this makes it any simpler, take a bowl of cereal as being our blood. The plasma is the milk, and the actual cereal are the blood cells floating around in the milk. Pretty simple putting it that way. Now, in the past, the understanding of our blood obviously wasn't like how it is now. For a while, scientists believed that the only cells in our blood were either red blood cells or white blood cells. However, over time, they were able to develop the understanding that this, of course, was not the case. In 1842, French bacteriologist and Dr. Alfred-François Donnet discovered that there were more structures in blood than just red and white blood cells. And Julius Bizot-Zero would be the first to name these new structures la piastrine del sangue, also known as blood platelets. Just gonna pause, that's in Italian. My Italian is not the best, but I tried my best to pronounce that. Bizot-Zero was soon able to describe the blood clotting abilities platelets had in 1882. And shortly after that, in 1916, James Homer Wright discovered megakaryocytes, the precursor of platelets, which allowed for substantial progress to be made in regenerative therapy techniques. After examining skin grafts in a study, clinicians were soon able to identify different proteins in the blood which were helpful in clotting. In fact, in the early 1940s, for wound healing, clinicians would actually use embryo extracts, as the extracts would of course contain platelets, and the platelets would be able to release these proteins called cytokines and growth factors, which are useful in healing. For blood to clot, it uses proteins called fibrin and thrombin for two different roles. The thrombin converts fibrinogen to fibrin, and when this is combined with platelets, it forms a blood clot. Now, thrombocytopenia is a condition where somebody has an abnormally low platelet count. And with platelets being responsible for clotting blood, this condition can lead to excessive bleeding. However, it was finally in the early 20th century when clinicians figured that a useful way they can treat thrombocytopenia is if they were to conduct platelet transfusions on people. The same way you can get a blood transfusion, they can do the same with platelets. To do this, they would need to get what's called platelet concentrate. Unlike blood, this platelet concentrate would be yellow and typically given in smaller doses. And the platelet concentrate would also have to be stored in certain conditions, around 4 degrees Celsius, and used within 24 hours as they lose viability quickly. Methods to improve this developed as the years went on, and this eventually allowed scientists to create what is now known as platelet-rich plasma, or PRP. The term platelet-rich plasma was first introduced in 1954 in a study by Kingsley et al. When referring to the standard platelet concentration they would use in transfusions. And soon enough, by the 1960s, the first blood bank PRP preparations came about, eventually becoming quite popular by the 1970s. But there was more to platelets than just transfusions. By 1972, platelets were used for the first time as a sealant in surgery. By 1975, PRP was first used as a method in reconstructive treatment. By 1987, PRP was used in heart surgery, and it was just by the late 1980s when PRP began being used in regenerative medicine. PRP was initially well known for being used for general and cardiac surgery. This is the mid to lower body area. However, it was by the early 1990s when a new area started becoming popular for PRP to use, and this area was the face. They began using PRP for maxillofacial surgery. Specifically, PRP was useful in improving how they'd incorporate transplants for reconstruction of the mandible or lower jaw. Not only this, but by the late 1990s, PRP began being used in dentistry to help improve the way dental implants were incorporated and to facilitate bone regeneration. In 2009, they confirmed the hypothesis that PRP was beneficial in treating orthopedic conditions. And by 2010, or even a bit earlier, they had started successfully utilizing PRP in cosmetic dermatology. They were able to figure that if PRP was useful in all these other areas of our body and health, it can most definitely be useful in cosmetic dermatology as well. PRP was working wonders for people's skin. I mean, after a simple injection, people's skin was said to look younger. Their skin was more hydrated. It was more flexible. It had better color. And it wasn't just skin, but their hair too. With PRP treatment, people were able to help improve hair growth. In fact, they found that doing a PRP injection before having a hair transplant was not only beneficial in enhancing one's hair growth, but it was beneficial in improving hair density as well. All in all, PRP was a kind of medical hidden gem in the cosmetic world, and people looking for any improvement for their face or their skin were able to get that in the form of these injections. PRP shortly began growing its way into the media, but it wasn't becoming known because of its cosmetic abilities at first. It was becoming known because of its use in athletes. February 16, 2009, a promising treatment for athletes in blood, New York Times' Alan Schwartz let it be known that, quote, two of the Pittsburgh Steelers' biggest stars, Hines Ward and Troy Polamalu, used their own blood in an innovative injury treatment before winning the Super Bowl. In fact, at least one major league pitcher, about 20 professional soccer players, and perhaps hundreds of recreational athletes have also undergone the procedure commonly called platelet-rich plasma therapy. And it wasn't just them. It was also, in 2009, Chris Canty, a defensive tackle for the New York Giants. Also in 2010, Tiger Woods, champion golfer, and Cliff Lee, the Seattle Mariners pitcher. At the time, all have raved about their success with PRP in treating their injuries. And because of this, athletes of all levels were lining up at their local orthopedic surgeon's office to get this very controversial procedure done. It was expensive, an average of about $1,000 per injection. Insurers did not cover it. There was heavy debate on whether this treatment broke anti-doping rules, and many debated if it even worked. But regardless if it worked or not, patients were eager for relief, and they were willing to pay out of pocket to see if this new treatment would be just the thing they needed in treating their injuries. While PRP was better known in the media during the late 2000s and early 2010s as being a method used in the treatment of athletes, it didn't take long for this treatment to become popularized for its aesthetic abilities. March 10, 2013, the world was able to witness the wonders of PRP as Kim Kardashian went to take on the vampire facial during the Keeping Up with the Kardashians spinoff, Kim and Kourtney Take Miami. Well, how does this work? In a vampire facial, blood is taken from one's arm. After this, the blood is then put through a machine called a centrifuge, which works by spinning really fast, and as it spins, it begins separating the platelets from the blood. By the way, the blood that's taken is blood from the actual client. With a vampire facial, you would only be using your own blood, not anybody else's. After the platelets are separated and one's face is numbed with numbing cream, the medical professional would then use a microneedle, and this would be used to inject the PRP into the patient's face through small punctures. Other than the vampire facial, there's also something called the vampire face lift, and this is pretty similar to the facial. The main difference just seems to be that for a facial, they use a microneedle to rub on your face, whereas the facelift involves injections with a needle, so it goes deeper into the skin layer. This process takes about an hour to complete, and the main goal of it is supposed to be to reduce wrinkles, improve skin texture, and essentially just rejuvenate the face. How does it do this? Well, in our plasma, specifically in our platelets, we have different reparative cells. For example, like mentioned, we have these proteins called growth factors. And so with a vampire facial, these platelets should be able to secrete these growth factors, which would then be released into the skin. And in turn, this should help heal and repair our tissue, which in theory should be beneficial in treating all skin types. This was a hypothesis that was confirmed in the 1980s after clinicians were able to demonstrate that growth factors were released from platelets which then helped to repair damaged tissue, including in things like skin ulcers, for example. Many sources online state that the vampire facial was started by a woman by the name of Dr. Barbara Sturm. However, other sources state that the inventor was a man by the name of Dr. Charles Runels, who actually happens to be the trademark holder of the term vampire facial, something that's been in place since September 2013. Just to know, as I refer to vampire facials in this case, I'm not referring to vampire facials trademarked by Dr. Charles Runels. I'm referring to vampire facials, just the procedure that everyone knows the name by. And might I say, there would actually later be some controversy regarding this, which we will be getting into later in this video. Kim was told about this vampire facial procedure by her friend Jonathan Chebin. In this episode, she and the doctor explain what is about to happen, and Kim lies on the table as a microneedle is used to inject her PRP into her face. During this procedure, Kim is in a lot of pain. She expresses how much it hurts, and she even stated, quote,
"I will never get a facelift if it feels like that."
This procedure did not feel good for Kim whatsoever. In fact, years after it happened, she would later state that she regrets getting it and that it wasn't for her. But even though this did kind of make it seem like this procedure would be a nightmare, this didn't hinder the media from wanting to go get it, because soon enough, people were lining up at the local dermatologist's office to get this vampire facial done. After Kim Kardashian first posted that image of her post-vampire facial in March 2013, many took to the internet sharing images of themselves getting this procedure done. It was almost to some kind of like a new trend. On December 28, 2013, supermodel, TV host, and actress Barbara Faley too posted a similar selfie on Instagram after getting a vampire facial done. In February 2016, model and presenter Fern McCann posted the same thing as well. And during season 1 of The Goop Lab on Netflix in 2020, Gwyneth Paltrow was even seen getting a vampire facial done by naturopathic doctor Nigma Talib. Social media and celebrity endorsement contributed significantly to the popularity of vampire facials amongst the general public. In fact, a study looking at the analytics of search trends between October 2010 to October 2020 showed that after that initial post from Kim Kardashian in March 2013, the search terms of vampire facial and blood facial on Google spiked tremendously in both web search and image search categories. And this wasn't just nationally, this was globally. Globally, many people around the world were searching up this new vampire facial term. The study stated the following stats, quote, Kim's post led to a search interest over time, IOT, of 100, representing peak popularity. For reference, search trends for presidential election in the US had an IOT of less than 25 until the election years 2016, IOT 32, and 2020, IOT 100. Not only this, but it also stated, quote, according to Google Trends, the worldwide average IOT was between 0 and 1 for vampire facial before 2013. But from 2013 to 2020, the monthly average IOT was 11.4. People were in awe of this new beauty revelation with a name so fitting for the procedure. Count Dracula of Transylvania, he's the creature who survives on the blood of others. He needs the blood of others to maintain vitality. By drinking blood, he's able to rejuvenate himself, gain strength, and grow younger. He particularly prefers women as his victims, and by drinking their blood, he's able to gain power in an effort to maintain his youth. So what defines a vampire? A vampire is typically characterized by a pallor, sickly, and undead being. But most notably, vampires take others' blood and drink it in an effort to get some energy, some youth, and life given to them. A facial is a type of skin treatment to help beautify one's face. Just like the vampire does, a vampire facial utilizes blood to take one's skin from being wrinkly, lifeless, and colorless to being youthful, lively, and rejuvenated. With this procedure now being a little bit more mainstream and better known to the general population, this meant that more medical professionals were able to implement having such a procedure at their clinic. But while this also meant more medical professionals were able to expand their services offered, this also meant there was an opportunity for those looking for a quick cash grab to perform such a procedure with ulterior motives. And this was the reality for a woman named Maria de Lourdes Ramos de Ruiz. Maria de Lourdes Ramos de Ruiz was born in 1961. Not too much is known about her background, but what is known is that Maria lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and at some point in time, she was a licensed cosmetologist. Sometime around or before 2012, Maria began a business named the VIP Beauty Salon and Spa in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was at this business where she offered different services in the beauty field, including cool sculpting of the breast and buttocks, cellulite treatments, Botox injections, and stem cell therapy without the use of actual stem cells. But it was after the vampire facial began making its way into popularity when she started offering this as a service at the spa. A typical vampire facial looks to cost anywhere between about $500 to $1,400 or more per session. Maria's spa, on the other hand, allegedly charged just about $100, giving clients a very good deal. But we of course come to find out that this deal might actually not have been a good one considering the treatment of her clients. During the summer of 2018, there was a woman, she was around 40 to 50 years old, and she went out of the country to go on vacation. I'm not sure what this woman's name is, but we'll call her Lucy. Now, while Lucy was on her vacation, she ended up getting some tests done. She completed a rapid HIV test, formerly known as the human immunodeficiency virus test. And I'm not too sure exactly why she got the testing done. There could be a possibility that the country she was entering required it. I'm not sure, but she got tested with a rapid HIV test while on vacation. Now, Lucy was low risk for HIV. Nothing put her in a high risk category for testing positive for this virus. So that's why it was very shocking when she received her results back and it showed she tested positive. Eventually, when Lucy got back to the States, she went to get evaluated by a medical professional. And when she did, she again tested positive through an HIV antigen antibody rapid test. And just that same day, she received a confirmed official diagnosis of a stage 1 HIV infection. Now, let's just backtrack a little bit. Lucy, again, was low risk for HIV. She had no injection drug use, no recent blood transfusions, no recent sexual contact with anyone other than her current sexual partner, and even her partner themselves, they received a negative HIV test result after Lucy was diagnosed. So based on all of this, it was odd that she would all of a sudden test positive for HIV. But there was one thing that made sense on how all of this could have happened. And this all relates back to that VIP beauty salon and spa. Just a few months back in spring of 2018, Lucy had actually gone to the VIP beauty salon to get a procedure done with none other than Maria de Lourdes Ramos de Ruiz. And it was at this appointment where Lucy had gotten this well-known PRP microneedling procedure, the vampire facial. Lucy then told the people who were evaluating her, like, yeah, just a few months back, I got this facial at the salon and spa. They used a microneedle and she just gave the rundown of everything that happened. Nothing regarding this sounded good whatsoever. And because of this, it wasn't too long before when the VIP beauty spa was reported to the New Mexico Department of Health, or DOH, to be properly inspected. On September 7th, 2018, health inspectors from the Board of Barbers and Cosmetologists for the state of New Mexico, also known as the board, arrived at the VIP beauty spa to examine the conditions the facility was in. And what they found during that inspection was absolutely concerning. Inside that building, the inspectors witnessed health violations no health-related facility should ever have, and I'll read exactly what they found. In the spa, the kitchen area where food was stored and prepared was not completely separated. The area was being used for storage of various chemicals, products, and implements, and was also being used to process the blood for the vampire facials. Although the establishment had properly labeled sharps containers, used needles were being disposed of in the trash can, and there were no records of waste removal. Needles and syringes were laying around in different rooms on counters and not secure. Also, respondent told the team from the Department of Health that any leftover blood from the clients was poured down the drain. So yes, they were storing chemicals and unlabeled syringes beside food in the fridge, and they were pouring blood down the drain. Anyway, let's continue. Respondent did not ensure all infection control requirements were followed because there were several violations of sanitation and safety standards. The establishment had several household disinfectant sprays and wipes. However, they were not EPA-registered bacterial, fungicidal, and virucidal disinfectants. The examination tables, beds, foot tubs, equipment, instruments, and implements were not disinfected with EPA-registered disinfectants. Rather, household cleaners were used. used. The foot tubs did not appear too clean. They were cleaned with household disinfectants. The foot tubs were for household use and were not commercial grade. There were no tools or implements stored in disinfected, dry-covered, marked containers, nor were clean and dirty implements stored separately. There was no way of knowing what was disinfected and what was not. Combs, brushes, and implements were not in enclosed containers marked as ready to use. Nail files and buffers appeared to be worn and/or used. They should have been disposed of after being used on a client. Many multi-use, non-porous instruments, implements, equipment, and tools were not properly labeled or stored, making it impossible to determine that they had been properly disinfected. And finally, the procedure rooms all had equipment, machinery, instruments, and implements that appeared to be wiped, cleaned with household disinfectant wipes and/or sprays. Now, regarding prohibitions of the spa, they stated that 2 bottles of wine and a bottle of brandy were found in the establishment, and that some of the procedures performed are invasive and penetrate beyond the dermal layer of the skin. And after some further investigation, they discovered that the spa had, quote, foreign and American prescription and dangerous drugs and medical products that required an order from a licensed physician. So this in itself was already very bad, but this wasn't even all of it, because in an even bigger shocking moment, the board soon discovered that the VIP spa license had actually expired 5 years ago in 2013. According to state records, the business had actually failed an inspection that happened in 2012 after they were accused of providing a permanent makeup service without having a license. So because it failed its inspection in 2012, this was an unlicensed facility and it had been operating like this the entire time. Not only this, but they learned that Maria's cosmetologist license had too expired in 2013. Now, Kathy Ortiz, the deputy director for boards and commissions, stated that the regulation and licensing department were required to do inspections like the one that just happened every 18 months. So by this logic, why was it that Maria was able to operate this business for over 5 years without it being licensed or properly checked? Well, Ortiz stated that they did actually inspect Maria's spa, just not at that location. She stated the following.
We did inspect her prior to, but not at that location. She had a license and she was located at a different location, and we did inspect at that time.
After witnessing all of this and discovering the spa was unlicensed, on that very same day, the board immediately issued a cease and desist shutting down the spa. In a formal cease and desist letter they sent a few months later, on December 18th, they stated the following, quote, "The board's records indicate that you are not licensed to practice medicine in New Mexico. The practice of medicine in New Mexico or attempts to practice medicine in New Mexico without a license from the board violates state law and constitutes a 4th-degree felony, punishable by up to 18 months in prison, a fine of up to $5,000 or both for each violation. In particular, the board has received information indicating that in the absence of direct supervision by a properly licensed medical professional, you have performed vampire facial and Botox injection procedures at your spa, activities constituting the practice of medicine under this definition. Because you are not licensed to practice medicine in New Mexico, you must immediately cease and desist from all practices that constitute the practice of medicine as it is defined in New Mexico." Subsequently, after being shut down, the spa went on to print a sign to place on the door stating, quote, "All patients who have an appointment this Saturday 9th, Monday 10th, Tuesday 11th, Wednesday 12th, and Thursday 13th are informed that the spa will be closed due to a family emergency." But this was not a family emergency. This was a health emergency for the entire community. KGT News went to speak with Maria outside of the VIP spa after the spa was shut down. And you'll see in this video, she seemed to think that this was something that could be rectified.
If it's something that I have to stop doing it or something that I have to change it, I will change it. Happily, I'll do it.
She also told Action 7 News about her willingness to cooperate with the Department of Health's investigation and her concern for her clients.
I'm willing to work with them all the time, and I'm really concerned about my clients.
Because of the spa lacking a license and Maria having some time on her hands, as to her, the spa was only temporarily closed. On September 10th, 2018, Maria signed and submitted an establishment or enterprise license application in an attempt to get the license for the VIP salon and spa. This request was received by the board on September 11th. But after what they witnessed at her spa during their inspection, they soon issued Maria a notice of contemplated action, or NCA, which is essentially a notice letting her know that because of the things they've seen at her spa, that they have plans to take action against her license, and that if she wants to keep it, they would need to go through a formal hearing. In this NCA, they just listed every one of the reasons why her license should be taken away. And they let her know that, quote, the board has before it sufficient evidence which, if not rebutted or satisfactorily explained at a formal hearing, will justify the board in taking action to issue a fine or penalty, restrict, refuse, to issue or renew or suspend or revoke a license and or take other disciplinary action against respondent's license. The board voted to issue this NCA on September 14, 2018, and they soon mailed a copy to her on October 2nd. Maria did not end up requesting a hearing in response to the NCA to try getting her establishment license. So a few months later, on December 3rd, the board met, and at this meeting, they all voted against issuing her an establishment license, and this was officially signed that next year on Christmas Day, December 25th, 2019. Finally, the VIP spa was officially closed indefinitely. Throughout that time, the DOH and CDC, or Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, went on to conduct investigations on different cosmetic injection services to assess these services as a possible transmission route for HIV. They analyzed cases dating from spring 2018, when Lucy had gone as a client, to fall 2018 when the spa closed. Now, as mentioned, Maria had run this spa at multiple different locations. So they weren't just investigating one place. No, they had to investigate different locations to figure out where this infection possibly could have come from. Because the board had been inspecting the spa during September 2018 and they didn't have authority to collect specimens, the investigative team from the Department of Health and CDC weren't permitted to collect any specimens from the spa. What they instead needed to do, though, was that they needed to look through a client list so that they can get some information on everyone who has visited the spa and try to figure out who might have possibly been infected. There was one major problem, though. For some reason, the spa didn't have an appointment scheduling system that stored client contact information. So it was not possible for investigators simply to contact clients found listed at the spa. What they instead had to do was collect all client consent forms, handwritten appointment records, and phone contacts, and use the information found to cross-reference names and phone numbers of clients who were potentially affected. The investigative team was soon able to identify 59 clients as being considered at risk for exposure. This included 20 people who received PRP with microneedling at the spa and 39 who received other injection services, most notably Botox, during the case-finding period. And the reason they were able to specifically identify these at-risk clients is because they were able to cross-reference the list with the New Mexico State HIV Registry to find one identified client at the spa who had been diagnosed with HIV back in 2012. It was mentioned that the first language of a lot of the clients was Spanish, and because of this, in addition to the limited client information, the Department of Health took multiple approaches regarding their public health response. There wasn't just a client list available where they would be able to individually contact everybody who's been a client at the clinic, and not everybody spoke the same language to be able to communicate something in just English or just Spanish, for example. So instead of this being a direct contact scenario, they had to make a public, large-scale outreach effort to make sure that everyone in the community who may be affected is fully informed. They made out direct calls to any known clients of the spa, and they encouraged them to go for bloodborne pathogen testing. Additionally, they sent out several health alert notifications to providers in New Mexico, informing them that if a patient of theirs is diagnosed with HIV, that they should ask the patient about any spa services they might have received. The Department of Health also went on to inform multiple different agencies about the risk of HIV transmission regarding the spa's unsterile injection services. They communicated this to the Office of Border Health, the Border Infectious Disease Surveillance Group, neighboring jurisdictions through CDC's Epidemic Information Exchange, and they also published press releases with information regarding free testing for current and former clients of the spa at state public health offices. To be exact, between 2018 to 2023, they published 4 press releases. Members of the Department of Health's investigative team went on to visit multiple community health centers and businesses in predominantly Spanish-speaking neighborhoods to get testing information distributed to those who were clients of the spa in the community. And they went on to organize and advertise bloodborne pathogen testing events for current and former clients of the spa through social media, radio, newspaper, and television in both English and Spanish. Doing this did prove to be useful because it was during that winter of 2018 when the news broke, when a second patient had come forward with an HIV diagnosis. This woman was also between the ages 40 and 50, and during the fall of 2018, while this case was coming to light, she had done a rapid HIV test as part of a routine evaluation for life insurance. It was during this evaluation when she had a positive HIV screening test result, and it was that next year in the winter of 2019 when she received an official diagnosis of HIV. She too received PRP microneedling at the spa during the summer of 2018, and she was diagnosed with a stage 1 HIV infection. While one would hope this would be it, unfortunately, that was not the case because just a few years later, during the fall of 2021, a third patient came forward with a positive HIV diagnosis. This woman was between the ages 50 and 60. She received multiple PRP microneedling at procedures at the spa during both the spring and summer of 2018. But what stood out about her case, though, was that this patient actually had a positive HIV screening test result prior to coming to the spa. 2 years before she received any service from the spa, in the summer of 2016, she got a rapid HIV test as part of a routine evaluation for life insurance. And it was there where she tested positive during the HIV screening test. This means that this patient was exposed to the virus before coming to the spa. It was just in 2021 when she received an official diagnosis. And it wasn't just her who received a positive diagnosis, but a sexual partner of hers who was not a client of the spa also received a positive diagnosis as well during the fall of 2021. How she found out her diagnosis was that one day during fall of 2021, she was feeling very ill. And because of this, she was admitted to the hospital. It was at the hospital where it was said she presented with an AIDS-defining illness. And after doing some testing, they discovered she did have an HIV infection. In fact, she was diagnosed with a stage 3 HIV infection. Without treatment, the HIV infection progresses to different stages. The World Health Organization, or WHO, classifies HIV into 4 stages. Stage 1 is the primary infection stage where one might briefly show flu-like symptoms as the immune system starts making antibodies against the virus. This is also known as the seroconversion stage. Stage 2 is the clinically asymptomatic stage. It's also known as the latent stage, where one could be just living with the infection for several years, even lasting 10 years or longer, and not know it. Stage 3 is the symptomatic advanced HIV disease, or AHD stage. This is where one does show symptoms due to the damage of their immune system. And stage 4 is the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS stage. This is where the infection progresses from HIV to AIDS, and it's the most advanced stage of the infection. Once someone has the HIV infection, it doesn't leave the body. The body can't get rid of it. However, once somebody is infected, this doesn't necessarily mean they'll progress to the most advanced stages. Most people in the US with HIV actually don't develop AIDS at all. There are treatments and medications available that stop the progression of the disease. The patient was considered by the CDC to be at a chronic stage, and it wasn't just her, but also her partner. He was diagnosed with stage 3 HIV infection as well. According to the CDC, it should take anywhere from about 18 days to 90 days after exposure to get a diagnosis for HIV. And I'm unsure the reason the patient got the diagnosis only 5 years after the positive screening test result, but she did end up testing positive that year in 2021. So up until that point, by fall 2021, 4 people were confirmed to have tested positive for HIV in relation to this clinic. Since the last 2 appeared to have the HIV infection from before the spa visit, only 2 people had actually contracted HIV from the spa. But even just a few months before those last 2 individuals were diagnosed, it was actually that very same year, on April 21st, 2021, when, quote, Attorney General Hector Balderas announced the indictment of Maria de Lourdes Ramos de Ruiz, former owner of VIP Salon, on 24 felony charges, including practicing medicine without a license, racketeering, fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. The case went to trial the next year on June 24, 2022, and it was there where Maria pled guilty to 5 felony counts of practicing medicine without a license, with Attorney General Balderas stating, quote, This is a warning to those who place profit over the health and safety of New Mexico consumers, and I remain highly concerned that these procedures are not being regulated at the state and federal level. Maria had done a tremendous job for many years appearing to create this illusion that there was nothing wrong with her spa and that she was the proper authority to be performing such procedures. Through the investigation, they discovered that not only were her business and cosmetology licenses expired, but Maria had blatantly been lying to clients about her qualifications. In some doctor's offices, you might notice they have their certificates up on the wall showing when they graduated and the licenses and such that they have. Thing is, Maria had these certificates placed on the walls of her spa, but it turns out she had actually forged multiple of these certificates, which she then plastered on the walls of her spa. Not only this, but she had even faked a degree from the University of Phoenix to make it appear as though she had education from there when she did not. She placed fake diplomas and educational certificates on the walls of the salon, indicating that she was trained to perform procedures like Botox or vampire facials. The two who had contracted HIV from her spa had even told investigators that they genuinely thought that Maria was qualified to perform these procedures simply because of the certificates and diplomas that she had displayed all over the spa and salon. And all in all, throughout the investigation, by that time, the authorities alleged that about 137 clients received, quote, unlicensed and fraudulent services from Maria. Maria was later sentenced on October 5th, 2022, and it was on that Wednesday when she received a sentencing of 3.5 years to be spent in prison. Additionally, she was sentenced to 4 years of probation, 800 hours of community service, and she was required to pay restitution of an unknown amount to victims. As part of her plea agreement, the charges like money laundering and tax evasion were dropped, and she was only facing up to 7.5 years in prison. Ultimately, she only received 3.5 years in prison, with the other 4 years just being on probation. That's 3.5 years for giving patients HIV for the rest of their lives. And while one would hope no other patients would be diagnosed in relation to this clinic, that unfortunately was not the reality, because it would be in the spring of 2023 when another woman between the ages of 40 and 50 would receive a diagnosis of stage 3 advanced HIV after being hospitalized with an AIDS-defining illness. She too received PRP microneedling at the spa in the summer of 2018. After testing all 5 patients who were diagnosed with HIV between 2018 and 2023, as well as the client of the spa who was diagnosed in 2012, the CDC was able to determine that all 5 of the patients had cases related to the spa. As of right now, around 200 clients of VIP Spa and their sexual partners have gotten tested for HIV, and there have been no more positive results. There's also not been any positive results for other infections such as hepatitis B or C. Additionally, the investigation is still ongoing, and the public health response regarding spreading the word and getting people free testing is also continuing as well. During and after all of this occurred, some clients of the spa went on to speak on their experiences there. One previous customer stated the following in a phone call.
This is a life-changing experience. This is your life. Running away from it because it's scary will not make it better.
Another described the fear they had after hearing the news.
It was definitely a lot of fear. I was very scared, not only for myself, but, for the other people who had gotten procedures done here as well.
And after testing negative for the virus, she stated the following.
A big, huge relief, but it's still in the back of your mind. What if?
Another woman expressed her fear.
It made me sick to my stomach. I was upset. I was emotional. I was angry. Everything just starts running in your mind. What's going to happen if something were to happen? What am I looking forward to in the future? And I know if something is already in me, it's not like I can do anything about it.
She even mentioned concern for her mom, who was also a client at the spa.
We're going to go in 2 days, both me and my mom. She actually has been going longer than me. And she's actually one of the ones that was there last Monday. She got a procedure, the vampire lift, done last Monday.
One person commented on a KRQE YouTube video covering the case, stating, quote, I went there 2 times, no blood thing related, thank God, and they only accepted cash. I thought that was sketchy. A person on Reddit also shared their experiences, stating, quote, "This place was sketch as hell. I went into the VIP spa around 2017 to get a gift cert for my lady. She heard they had good deals and didn't think I went in because of a Groupon. Anyhow, they denied doing any services there. She wanted Botox and they said they don't do it there. When I was leaving, I verified the sign above the door said VIP spa. People have told me I look like a cop, so when this came out, the mystery was solved for me." So needless to say, there were people who did in fact have questionable experiences at this spa. Now, looking past everything that's gone on in this case, are vampire facials safe? Well, according to most doctors and even the American Academy of Dermatology, vampire facials are considered to be a procedure that is safe. It's a very low-risk procedure. Most of the main concerns experts have cited are simply just things like scarring, skin sensitivity, and maybe even an infection at the injection site. But that's a concern anytime a needle is inserted into your body. For a vampire facial, you are using your own blood. So at the end of the day, there should be no scenario where somebody else's blood is used or involved in your procedure. This case, however, the issue wasn't the vampire facial. The issue was the lack of proper sterile or hygiene practices by a person who had no business doing what she was doing to clients. The CDC wasn't able to find the exact source of contamination, but based on everything from their investigation, it's clear that this was either spread from needles being reused, the inability of the spa to properly disinfect their tools, or even the inability of the spa to clean the client's skin before, during, and after doing these procedures. In any scenario, you're not supposed to use the same needle for more than one person. Once a needle is used on somebody, it needs to be properly disposed of, and a new needle needs to be used on someone else. It doesn't matter if it's a micro needle and it's not going as deep as a normal needle would go, it needs to be a new needle. And before you even inject someone with a needle, you need to properly clean their skin. Not only this, but if you're having clients in any kind of room where you're doing some kind of body-related service, you should be wiping down every area clients are in contact with. Meaning the bed, the table, anything, these need to be wiped down. These are simple tasks that clearly the spa did not do. And to hear the condition they had the spa in, with needles beside food in the fridge and opened needles just sitting all around, is absolutely wild. But say this to say, while people do have mixed emotions on vampire facials regarding whether they even work or not, at the end of the day, the main important thing is that with a proper medical professional, they are relatively low risk. It's also very important to emphasize that even if you find somebody who's offering a lower price for any procedure, you should always go to a medical professional to get a procedure like this done. When you're dealing with blood and needles, these are things that require a proper sterile field. So even if you have to pay more, for your own safety, it's best to go to a medical professional. Federal health officials stated that these diagnoses are believed to be the first documented cases of people contracting HIV through a cosmetic procedure using needles. And the reason for this is simply because of the lack of sterile protocols being followed and the lack of an actual licensed medical professional during the procedure. PRP today is still being used for cosmetic dermatology purposes. Vampire facials are still being done, hopefully only by those who are licensed to do so. PRP is also used today for removal of acne scars. It's still being used for injuries in athletes, and studies have even shown that it can also be beneficial in fat graft acceptance to help enhance plastic surgery. Likewise, it's used in multiple other fields of medicine, including gynecology, urology, and ophthalmology. And scientists and clinicians are still studying to develop new treatment modalities. Some people say it works for them, others say it doesn't. Some people like how it feels, others say it's painful. At the end of the day, opinions on it vary, and if somebody really wants to find out more on it, their best bet is to get in contact with their doctor or with a doctor who offers it and see where that might go. According to the CDC, New Mexico does not have any criminalization laws for negligent exposure of HIV. There are laws in other states to protect against this, as you'll see in this chart, but there are no laws like this in New Mexico. However, John Duran, the director of special prosecutions at the New Mexico Attorney General's office, did say the following quote.
And I think a bill and legislation put forth that would criminalize this specific behavior is most definitely warranted.
So the Attorney General's office does support criminalization laws being implemented. I guess it's just a matter of seeing when or if this would happen. Overall, the CDC ended off by recommending some critical changes, stating the following, quote, "This investigation underscores the importance of determining possible novel sources of HIV transmission among persons with no known HIV risk factors. Requiring adequate infection control practices at spa facilities offering cosmetic injection services can help prevent the transmission of HIV and other bloodborne pathogens. Maintenance of client records could facilitate investigations of suspected transmission at such facilities." So, future steps for boards of authority would be to put things in place to ensure facilities are properly checked and inspected on a regular basis, and to also put rules in place that would require those running facilities with cosmetic injections to have client information properly stored in a case like this where some kind of emergency were to arise. As for Kim Kardashian, like mentioned, this procedure was not for her. In 2017, she wrote on her now deleted app that she would never do this procedure again and stated that it was one of her biggest beauty regrets. This was, however, in part attributed to the lack of use of pain relief methods, as she stated, quote, "Before I got the procedure, I just found out that I was pregnant, so I couldn't use numbing cream or a painkiller, and both are suggested. It was really rough and painful for me. I couldn't tell anyone about the pregnancy either, but I pulled Jonathan aside and told him. My show was also filming the treatment, so I felt I couldn't chicken out. It was honestly the most painful thing ever." Now, even though Kim didn't have the best experience, Kourtney Kardashian, on the other hand, appeared to love it. She stated that it made her look and feel refreshed. So there's definitely mixed emotions on this procedure. What is interesting, though, is that in a turn of events is that Kim Kardashian actually ended up suing a doctor in Alabama, as this doctor was using her name to promote vampire facials. In December 2019, more than 6 years after Kim's procedure, Kim filed a lawsuit against Dr. Charles Runels and his practice, the Cellular Medicine Association, for, quote, "copyright infringement, infringement of registered mark, false association, violation of the right of publicity, and California common law trademark infringement." Runels, who also described himself as the orgasm doctor and the Calvin Klein of medicine, according to court records, had trademarked the term vampire facials and went on to plaster Kim's name and likeness on his website. Not only this, but he had also had her name printed on a pamphlet, posted articles and videos, and featured an image of her on his LinkedIn relating her to the vampire facials. And he was doing this in relation to the vampire facials trademark, as opposed to just like the vampire facials procedure, if that makes any sense, since he was the one who trademarked it back in 2013. Her attorney had requested that Runels take down both the images and her name, but instead of doing this, Runels requested money in exchange, and so they ended up going to court. Runels argued that Kim used his trademark of the vampire facial to promote her show. In a tweet, he stated, quote, "Kim Kardashian West uses vampire facial to promote her TV show and herself without my permission, then wants part of the profits from all procedures." And he further went on to state, quote, "I feel like this is someone shaking down some little doctor for something that is public knowledge." The thing is, Kim never agreed to be the face of endorsement for such a campaign. They never asked her for permission, nor did she give permission. Not only this, but from that point, it's been 7 years since she got the procedure done, and she never received the service from Dr. Runels. She received it from somebody named Dr. Gallo. And remember how I mentioned that many sources state that the inventor of this procedure was a woman named Dr. Barbara Sturm? Well, in an interview with Joanna Check, Barbara stated that she came up with blood facials. And so when the interviewer clarified that she was talking about vampire facials, Dr. Sturm had stated the following, quote, "Yes, but I came up with the blood facial probably 7 years before vampire facials." So it seems as though he didn't necessarily create the type of procedure, as it appears Dr. Sturm is credited by many as the inventor, claiming to have first done PRP for aesthetic purposes in 2002. Whereas Dr. Runels was first introduced to PRP in 2010. It was referred to as blood facials by many before, and Dr. Runels trademarked the term vampire facials later on. Eventually, 2 months later, in February 2020, Kim and Dr. Runels settled the lawsuit, the images were removed, and that was that. So finally, after hearing about everything regarding this case, this brings us to our first question. What defines a vampire? Although we described the relation of the vampire facial to actual movie vampires in the context of blood having the ability to rejuvenate oneself and make them appear younger, in this case, the vampire wasn't necessarily any of the clients. Because when you actually think of it, the true vampire was Maria Lourdes Ramos de Ruiz. Like a vampire, Maria was the one who needed blood to survive. Without the blood of multiple clients, it wouldn't have been possible for the spa to thrive and in turn for Maria to as well. Just like Dracula, she preyed on innocent people, trying to go about their day and with no regard for how it might affect them, took their money knowing they weren't treated with the utmost care. The same way women were Dracula's preferred victims, Maria's preferred or at least main victims were women as well. The same way a vampire's life had expired long before they would wreak havoc on unsuspecting victims, Maria's license too had expired before doing the same thing. It was a parasitic relationship. Instead of fangs, she used her needles. She got the blood, she got the cash, and in turn, patients got infected. And if not infected, they got the fear of living every day not knowing when or if there might be a time they too would receive a positive test result. What she did was not and will never be okay. If there's any takeaway, if you ever plan on getting this procedure done, make sure to go to a qualified licensed medical professional. If you're unsure if somebody is licensed, ask around, search it up until you're able to confirm it. And always speak with your physician about alternative options and their opinion. Look for the signs and trust your intuition. If something feels sketchy, it probably is. Don't go. As long as you take the right steps, maybe during this spooky season, you could consider diving into the world of the vampire facial. But yes, that is it for today's case. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you think the sentencing was justified? Do you think it was reasonable? Please let me know your thoughts on this story below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any other videos on medical cases, crime, and mysteries. Also, don't forget to download June's Journey through the link below or by scanning the QR code on the screens. Bye now.